Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the warm welcome. Thank you, Nicole, for the nice words, and Glenn for the hospitality. It's been a great time so far. I really felt privileged to be part of your session this afternoon, and I felt like I got a little bit of an insider's view on what it's like to be in ops, and it was great food for thought for me as a practitioner and as somebody who doesn't think a lot about theory and spends a lot of time in the trenches. It was really a fun experience, so thank you. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about myself and why the membership economy is so important to me and how I got to this point of really devoting my career to issues around membership. And then I promise I'll get into the main part of the presentation, which is really about what the membership economy is, why I think it's relevant for all of you, and why it's relevant for organizations. But first, I want to just tell you a little bit about the background of how I got here. So as Nicole said, I've been a consultant for most of my career, both pre- and post-business school. And I didn't really have a specialty. I did a lot of strategy work, a lot of work that touched on marketing, work that touched on ops, lots of different kinds of organizations, and didn't really have a focus. And then in 2003, just a couple of weeks after I found out I was pregnant with my third child, I got a consulting project at Netflix. And at the time, Netflix had just gone public, and I didn't know a lot about it other than that I loved getting my 3 movies at a time, my 3 discs out at a time. And when I got there, I fell in love. The business model of Netflix made so much sense to me and seemed so elegant. Everything from the subscription model to their effort to create an algorithm to predict what other movies their customers would like, to the fact that all of their decisions seemed to be, to quote Ludo, fair process and based on data, which they had in abundance because of their business model and because of their online tracking. I loved every bit of it, and I found a niche that really brought together my MBA interests with my interests in people. What I believe about membership and about subscription is that it appeals to people at their core, that people want to belong, they want to be recognized for being the individual that they are, and they want to have a sense of security that they're going to continue to get the benefits that they signed up for, as opposed to just being stuck with a product that's going to be obsolete in a short period of time. So, on some level, I think membership gives us what we need: connection, belonging, consistency. And for the businesses, obviously, it's really appealing because of the recurring revenue model, because of the loyalty it creates, and because of the ability to bring people in an organic way. So we've talked a little bit about what the membership economy has meant for me. Why did Glenn and Nicole ask me to come and speak to you? Why should this matter for academicians focused on operations? And what is the membership economy? Membership economy is a term that I coined to explain this tidal wave that I started seeing after my Netflix consulting gig, which ended up lasting about 2 years and I probably worked on 12 different projects over that time, everything from customer acquisition to retention to pricing models. And at the time when I was at Netflix, they were the only company that I knew that had that model. There was HBO, there were telcos, but Netflix really didn't have a lot of models for the kinds of metrics they should be using, for the kinds of processes that they should be implementing, and it felt like they were creating a lot of it on the fly. But after that project, I started to work with a lot of other companies that had the same kinds of goals and the same kinds of elements in their business model. And I call that the membership economy. It was changing how organizations are structured, how they deliver value, how they charge for that value, and how they communicate that value. And I think of it as being about transitions from ownership to access, from one time to many times, from transactional to relational, and from one-way communication, that is from the organization pushed out to the customer, to not only two-way, which is back to the organization, but also three-way, where customers are able to derive benefit from one another, and it extends the reach of the organization and the value that they're able to provide. So in a nutshell, that's what the membership economy is. That's what it's about, and it's something that I'm seeing in a lot of different kinds of organizations, which is why I wrote the book, as Nicole mentioned. So there's two things, as I mentioned, that really have always been here that are driving people's interest in the membership economy. One of them is recurring revenue and predictable demand. And that's what most businesses want. That's what most organizations want. You know, I've worked with religious institutions, professional associations, nonprofits, as well as with venture-backed technology companies, startups, big companies. Everybody wants this, predictable recurring revenue. And at the same time, individuals want to have safety, they want to have social connections, they want to be esteemed in the eyes of others, they want to be recognized for their specialness. And so those two things really, come together. So, I see this desire to join. I see it in sororities and fraternities. I see it in churches. And for example, one great example of a church where this is really prevalent is Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. And, I don't know if you know much about them, but they fill a 15,000-seat church sanctuary for worship 3 times every Sunday morning. That's 45,000 people that come every week. And on top of that, they live stream all of their services on their website. They enable, there's a sign-up feature on their website which allows you to pray for other people. So you can look and see who you're interested in praying for, and then you can let them know that you're praying for them. So they have an online prayer forum, and the church is growing leaps and bounds, even as people's likelihood of participating in their religious institutions are going the other way. So, we really want to belong. We want to be connected. It's also why we associate with sports teams. Go Patriots! Even when we've never met the players. I didn't say that. Nor did we ever. Many of us never even played the game. It's all about being connected, being recognized. And also it's about not having to decide. It's like knowing I belong here, so I don't have to make so many decisions. And that can be a huge relief for people. So these are kind of timeless ideas. So the question is, well, why is the membership economy happening now? Why was it that, 11 years ago when I was working at Netflix, I couldn't find any examples, but now I have enough examples to fill a book. And in fact, for those of you that have written a book, at one point I found myself with twice as much content as I was allowed to put into it. So there were just so many cases and so many interesting examples. It just seems like it's everywhere that I'm looking. So what is the secret sauce? What is it that's changed? And it's really, and maybe I'm biased because I live in Silicon Valley, but for me it's technology which is really extending the infrastructure of trust. So what that means to me is that because of technology, people are able to make connections with one another, even in cases when they don't know them personally. And it means that they're able to share resources that they might not have been willing to share with somebody that they didn't know well. There's really four areas of technology that I think are contributing to this. The first one's what's up on the screen. It's social. It allows us to be connected all the time, which means organizations can push out content to their customers anytime. They can be of service at any point in time, and they can also take feedback at any point in time. So that allows for an ongoing relationship and really sets the stage for the membership economy. A second big change in technology that I've seen, and it changed so quickly over the last 11 years, is the availability of online storage. So the price of storage is approaching zero at this point, which means that organizations can create huge repositories of content and software that they can share widely. A third piece is distribution, which makes it easy for customers to access information and also to communicate back to the organization or to one another. They're able to create content and share it at a very low cost, almost zero. And then finally, big data, which was alluded to earlier this afternoon, as something that is relevant in the operations world, also in the marketing world, for being able to analyze not only purchasing behavior, but also behavior in using the products and services. So I've seen this with my clients where it allows them to anticipate that somebody is going to cancel their subscription. It allows them to anticipate when somebody is going to be what I call a super user, that is really get involved more than their fair share and actually recruit other members, become an evangelist, create content that's useful to others without being paid for it. And the analytics that are possible now, that they allow even, I'm working with a company right now, OpenGov. It's an online platform for governments to provide transparency on their budgets to their constituents. And the company's only been around for about a year and a half, but they have so much data, not only on how people are buying their product and who's buying it, what their titles are, what their situations are, but also once they buy it, who's actually using it, who's logging in, what their titles are, what they're using it for, when their usage patterns change. And this is not, earlier today we were talking about these huge companies. These are small companies that are able to really apply these analytics in a way that creates stronger ongoing ties and long-term relationships. Two examples, Airbnb and what they've done in the hotel industry, and which I think is a pretty well-known story, and then LinkedIn and what they've done for the recruiting and HR business and how they've really changed how those businesses are run, the value that those roles can command. It used to be that if you had a great Rolodex, you had a big advantage. Now everybody has a great Rolodex through LinkedIn. It's easy to find people who fit your job profile. And then and the new value is providing, the connections and talking to the person and convincing them to come to your organization. But that's very different from what a recruiter used to be. So it's really disrupting the way they do business. So Nicole had suggested that I talk a little bit about what I think the membership economy means for operations, and more importantly for me, what operations means for the membership economy. I want to finish up by opening it up to you. I come from the marketing side, the strategy side, and very much in the trenches, very practical side. And I've never worked in operations with the exception of a couple of consulting projects when I was 25 years old. But I see the implications everywhere I look. And I see needs for research and good answers for making decisions that we just don't have. Mostly I've been thinking about this from a strategy perspective, but I see, when I say you need to think about your pricing and you need to move to a subscription model, a lot of questions come up about how many levels of subscription should we have, and what's the right price, and how should we focus these different tiers, and should we offer extra add-on services, because sometimes there is a true cost. So for example, if we have a membership model where you become a member and you have access to the community, but then we have a live conference, should we charge extra for that, or should we charge a higher price for the subscription? So thinking about that in a systematic way is something that I've struggled with and would love guidance. Thinking about how organizations can develop ongoing relationships with consistency and continuity. So moving from a transactional model to a relational model is great, except the customer actually expects you to have a relationship with them. They expect you to behave in a consistent way. They expect you to learn from the things they're doing. Most customers are pretty sophisticated, at least sophisticated enough to know that you probably have the data that should allow you to know that, I have a kid in college and I'm not interested in diapers, for example. And so, figuring out how to create systems for this is really important. So, there's a bunch of things that fall into this category of how do you operationalize, how do you create process, how do you show organizations how to behave in a mature way in this world that is so rapidly changing. I had a few specific questions that I'd love to get thoughts on. One of them is, what are the appropriate responses when a competitor moves to subscription pricing? A second one is, moving from a specific product model to a benefits model. So what I mean by that is, as I said with the Netflix one, of moving from you go and you buy the one movie you want and then you own it forever, and if you want to get more value from it, you watch it twice or 3 times, or maybe, the onus is on you to trade with a friend, to a model where you're guaranteed to always have a movie on Saturday night when the mood strikes you. So, how does moving from a specific product model to this benefits model impact supply chain challenges? So, I can think of some things just, logically that, you probably don't need the same amount of inventory. It's probably more flexible. but I'd be really interested in being, I can't show people, hey, here's what it costs this way, and here's what it costs when you move to a benefits model, even though I have an instinct that it seems to be working for the companies that I work with. Third thing is impact of subscription pricing on market valuation of organizations. And I've seen that, anecdotally, like, the difference between Netflix and Blockbuster, for example. But thinking about that more systemically and trying to understand what's the value, because I know from a venture capital perspective that the VCs really only want to invest in subscription businesses at this point. They want SaaS, they want recurring revenue. But it's not totally clear to me that it's always the best. And figuring out when does it make sense, when doesn't it make sense, and what's the value would be really helpful. Another thing is I talk about a super user, which I recognize when I see them. They're the people that do 20 hours a week on a community site, and they provide all kinds of tips and advice to help others. They spend more than their fair share of time helping the organization become more successful. And we see that in companies. We see it at Quora and LinkedIn and Facebook and Pinterest, but we also see it in churches and associations. There are just always some people who do more than their fair share. And there's a little bit of evidence coming from companies like Lithium, that is a platform for online communities, that starts to indicate that there are these super users who behave differently from everybody else, and also that there are ways to onboard people so that the likelihood of them becoming super users increases, so that you get more than your fair share of super users. And for me, that's a really interesting area, and I think a lot of companies are really trying to understand how do you do that. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, but how do you decide what goes into the subscription? This flummoxes organizations. What is actually guaranteed to you regardless? You pay one price and you get access to everything, and what is special and above that? And how do you think about offering things a la carte as opposed to offering a higher tier? I did a lot of work for SurveyMonkey when they were transitioning from having a single pricing model to having multiple tiers. And there was a lot of discussion about, what about if they want custom survey? What about if they want access to some of the research that we have? They have all these, PhD, research people who can create these great surveys. Do we charge extra for that, or do we provide those all, for everybody? And thinking about, how much value do you provide, especially because it's so hard to take away value in this model. It's real. When you make a mistake and you price too high, it's virtually impossible to raise your price. So, those are some of the questions that I have. Thank you for your attention tonight. I'm really appreciative for your focus and your listening, and for some of the conversations that I've had with many of you over the last couple of days about how membership and what I've been researching and thinking about applies to your areas of expertise and research. Thanks, everybody.